Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. My first question is for Dr. White. Dr. White, I represent the largest agriculture-producing congressional district in the country, and I'm so proud that the air we breathe there, the waters that my children and grandsons swim in are cleaner today than they were when I was growing up. As you can imagine, our farmers and ranchers utilize quite a range of tools, including herbicides and pesticides. And kind of a follow-up to Dr. Babin's thoughts or his question on glyphosate. I'm new here, so I was trying to understand, it was in a report, it was out of a report, but at the end of the day, it looked like the conclusion was glyphosate, Roundup, was not carcinogen. It's been around since 1960, and somehow that was taken out of the report, and I'm just trying to fill in a few loose ends. Why was it left out of the report or taken out of it?
So I can't speak to exactly why it was included or taken out of the report, but what I will tell you is this is why it's so important to have a consistent framework for how science evaluations are conducted, is that it's clear and transparent. You can see very clearly what processes EPA would have used to evaluate glyphosate, what science they used to make their conclusions, and it would be right there in front of you. So there would be no question about whether or not that data was accurate or valid.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for Dr. Belzer. I'm trying to understand these regulatory impact analysis. RIAs is another acronym for me. When they report RIAs to the OMB, is there any type of independent peer review before it's submitted?
I would say sometimes there is an internal peer review conducted by an agency, but generally that's not the case. There's basically OMB is performing the peer review. And one of the problems with that, from my perspective, is that OMB doesn't disclose the results of its peer review. It works for the president, and so its advice is proprietary to the president. I think that things would be a lot better if OMB actually disclosed its independent reviews of these documents. And I've advocated that since I worked there and told to mind my own business.
Do you think independent peer reviews would be of any help to maybe not every report, but a certain number of them randomly selected?
Certainly the larger ones ought to be. I think that the existence of an effective peer review process improves the quality of what agencies produce in analysis. I mean, just simply the knowledge that you're going to be peer reviewed goes a long way toward improving quality. Then, as Dr. White's pointing out, the panels, having a good peer review panel is very helpful. I'm the only person here who's actually a member of a science advisory board panel. And I know the processes that, at least for my panel, how it goes on. It is a challenging enterprise with a panel of 15 members, for typically only 2 might be knowledgeable at a given issue that's actually on the table. So I think the peer review process does need to be restructured to make sure that there really are experts in individual areas, and that they don't, and that they have intellectual diversity. I don't care at all about who they work for, but intellectual diversity is the key toward teasing out the best scientific knowledge.
Okay, well, my last question is for Mr. Holmstead. You look bored there. No one's asked you a question. It has to do with WOTUS, Waters of the U.S. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Senator Bob Dole 6-7 months ago and had the conversation. He was one of the original co-authors of WOTUS, and of course I had to ask him, well, what does navigable stream mean to you? And what was your intention? And of course he said, well, you know, there's only 3 navigable streams in Kansas, and it's very obvious what we meant. And now there's concern that in my farmers that WOTUS is actually managing land. If you regulate water to such a great extent, it feels like you're regulating land, even though the agency said it doesn't want to regulate private property. So I guess my question is, how can the agency deny that by expanding vastly the definitions of WOTUS, that it effectively limiting the activities that it can occur on private property? I guess I'm trying to understand, WOTUS is expanded so much under the current interpretation that it's impacting private property.
You know, people are, I don't think anybody at EPA could dispute that they're regulating private property. I mean, that's what it's all about. So even if you own your land, even if you only own your land for 100 years, if somebody comes in and says there's a wetland on your land, you have to get a permit and you can be prevented from using that land. That's why there's been so much debate and discussion over what really is a wetland. And this most recent rule that's been referred to as WOTUS really does significantly expand the net, expand the jurisdiction, the amount of land that's covered by that process. And I think that's inappropriate. And I also think it's, well, I think it's probably illegal. But I also think this is an area where Congress could really step in and provide some guidance, because this is a debate that's gone on for many, many years now, with EPA making several stabs at trying to, define the type of land over which EPA and the Corps should have jurisdiction, and that's been difficult to do. But EPA has tried several times, and the courts have sent it back saying, no, you've gone too far. And I assume that this new EPA will make another stab at that and try to do something that's more reasonable and it's more understandable for people who really do care about what is a wetland.
Thank you for being so candid.
Gentleman's time.